On a quiet, snowy night in February 2012, a young woman named Samantha Koenig stood behind the counter of a small coffee stand in Anchorage, Alaska, unaware that her life was about to take a dark and irreversible turn. Moments later, she would vanish without a trace. Her family and friends would spend weeks searching for her, clinging to hope with every passing day. Yet, one of the most disturbing details of the case wouldn't come to light until later. A photograph, allegedly taken to prove she was still alive, was a cruel and horrifying lie. The cold winter night in Alaska made it feel like time was suspended. The snowflakes seemed to float down from the heavens, each one frozen in a delicate moment. In this seemingly peaceful world, Samantha Koenig's world was torn apart. Israel Keyes, a man who was careful and cold-blooded, orchestrated her abduction. But what he would do next would haunt her family and the authorities for months. Imagine waiting for weeks, holding on to a photograph that shows your loved one alive, only to discover the truth, that the smile in the picture was fake, a mask concealing a reality darker than you could ever imagine. The pain, the anger, the disbelief. How would you feel? This is the story of Israel Keyes, a man who, beneath his calm exterior, carried a monstrous secret. But the story of Samantha Koenig was only the beginning. Today, we take you deep into one of the most horrific and methodical serial killer cases in modern American history. It began with the abduction of Samantha Koenig, a young woman who worked at a coffee stand. However, her abduction would unravel a chilling trail of other murders, and a man who had been living amongst us, unnoticed for years. His name was Israel Keyes, and his methodical approach to killing was not only terrifying, it was calculated, precise, and deeply disturbing. Keyes was a man who blended into the background, always maintaining a low profile, appearing normal to those around him. He was meticulous in everything he did, his personal life, his work, and most importantly, his deadly activities. When his killing spree began to surface, investigators would uncover a monster with a mind as cold as the Alaskan winter. But as we explore the events leading up to his capture, we'll also uncover how Keyes' ability to evade capture for so long led to questions about how we investigate serial crimes, and whether the justice system could have stopped him sooner. Samantha Koenig was more than just a victim. She was a vibrant, young woman whose life was full of potential. She was 18 years old, bright-eyed, with dreams of going to college and carving out a successful life for herself. Born and raised in Anchorage, she loved her family and enjoyed her work at the coffee kiosk, a place where she made connections with the locals. She had an easy smile and a warmth that radiated to everyone around her. She was the kind of person who you wouldn't expect anything bad to happen to, but that would change in an instant. Samantha had been planning for her future, saving up money from her part-time job at the coffee stand. She had hopes of pursuing higher education and eventually becoming something more than just another person in the world. Her parents were supportive of her dreams. They believed in her. The family was close-knit, and the thought of something so horrific happening to her was unimaginable. The coffee stand she worked at was small, but it had a steady stream of customers. For Samantha, it was a job she liked, simple, familiar. And on February 1st, 2012, when she closed up her shift, she had no idea that she was about to become the next victim of a serial killer. It wasn't supposed to happen that way, but in that moment, her life changed forever. Samantha was just doing her job, living her life. How often do we hear about tragic events like this happening to people who are just like us? Have you ever thought about how fragile life can be? Or how one moment can change everything? The night Samantha disappeared was cold and dark. As she finished her shift, she probably felt the icy breath of the Alaskan winter creeping in. The quiet of the small coffee stand, the final moments of her work day, it all seemed so normal. But outside, lurking in the darkness, was Israel Keyes. He had been watching her for days, planning this moment with chilling precision. When she closed the kiosk and stepped out into the night, he seized his chance. Israel Keyes was methodical. He had been planning Samantha's abduction for a while. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment decision. Everything about the night was calculated. Keyes pulled up in his vehicle, a nondescript truck that blended into the surroundings. He was waiting, patient, knowing exactly what to do when the time came. He had no intention of leaving any trace behind. Samantha didn't stand a chance. She was forced into the truck, the door slamming shut behind her as she struggled. Keyes, however, remained calm. His experience in abducting people made him methodical and clinical. His plan was in motion, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. As he drove off into the dark Alaskan night, Samantha could have realized the gravity of the situation. Her future, her dreams, everything, was slipping away in the grip of a man whose mind was twisted beyond recognition. But this was only the beginning. Israel Keyes wasn't just about to kill her. He had something much darker in store. Keyes didn't just kill his victims, he treated them like objects. Samantha was no exception. After abducting her, he kept her in his shed for weeks. Alaska's freezing temperatures made it easy to store her body, but it was what Keyes did next that shocked everyone. He decided to create a fake proof-of-life photograph. A photo that would leave her family clinging to a hope that wasn't real. In the photo, Samantha sat upright, her eyes open, her hair braided neatly, her face made up in makeup. Keyes knew exactly what he was doing. He had taken the time to braid Samantha's hair, to apply makeup to her face to make her look alive. But the most disturbing part? He had sewn her eyelids open to make it appear as though she was looking at the camera, alive and well. The sickening level of detail he went to in creating this false image was a clear sign of just how twisted his mind had become. Israel Keyes made sure that every detail of the photo was perfect. Samantha's face was frozen in a deceptive smile, her body propped up in a position that made her look like she was alive. But the most sinister detail was the way he had manipulated her eyes. Her eyelids were sewn open, making it seem like she was looking at the camera, staring into the lens. She wasn't dead in the picture. She was a lifeless doll, propped up by a monster who wanted to play a cruel game. Can you even begin to imagine the horror Samantha's family must have felt when they saw that photo? They were convinced she was still alive. The emotional roller coaster they went through. It must have been unimaginable. When Samantha's family received the photo, they didn't know what to think. Her father, worried about the strange details, immediately noticed that her hair was braided in a way she never wore it. It didn't sit right with him. Something was wrong. The investigation into Samantha's disappearance was slow at first. With no solid leads, the police were at a loss. They searched for any sign of her, following up on every tip, every piece of information they received. Her parents, unable to stand still, took matters into their own hands. They printed flyers, they talked to anyone who would listen. But despite their efforts, it felt like they were getting nowhere. As the weeks passed, the authorities kept investigating, but nothing seemed to make sense. Then the photo was released, and Samantha's father knew it wasn't just an ordinary missing persons case anymore. He didn't know why, but something about that photo just felt off. It wasn't right. But what the authorities didn't know was that Samantha's fate had already been sealed. The investigation had barely scratched the surface, and Israel Keyes had no intention of making it easy for anyone to find the truth. The investigation into Samantha's disappearance was stalling. Leads were growing cold, and her family, devastated, was running out of hope. The authorities were desperately trying to piece together the sparse evidence they had, but nothing seemed to be pointing them in the right direction. Then, a break came from an unexpected source. Surveillance footage from a local store revealed a vehicle similar to Keyes' truck, spotted near another crime scene. At first, the police had no idea who Samantha's abductor could be. They'd worked tirelessly to follow every possible lead, but all they had were bits and pieces, some sightings, some vague descriptions, but nothing concrete. Samantha's family remained in constant anguish, hoping for any scrap of information. But with each passing day, it seemed less likely that they would ever see her again. Keyes was an experienced predator. He had learned how to blend in, how to cover his tracks. He was patient, and that patience paid off for him, but it would eventually run out. Surveillance footage was the first clue that linked him to the crime. The truck, parked in a remote area, matched the description given by witnesses. It was the first real lead in weeks. Investigators quickly set to work, cross-referencing records, trying to piece together Keyes' movements. His name, when it came up, meant nothing at first, but soon it would. The police pulled up surveillance footage showing a truck matching the one seen near the crime scene, but they still had no idea it was Israel Keyes at the wheel. Then they dug deeper, and through a network of cross-reference databases and vehicle registrations, his name surfaced. It was an eerie feeling, knowing they were finally close to capturing a man who had been under their noses for so long. The psychological weight on the investigators was immense. Each new detail, every piece of the puzzle that fell into place, was not just a professional breakthrough, it was a personal one. The investigators knew that they were getting closer to solving a case that had already taken too much from the Koenig family. Imagine being in the investigators' shoes. Just a few weeks before, the case seemed impossible. Now they were starting to connect the dots. The relief must have been overwhelming. But was it enough? Was this the man who had taken Samantha's life? With Keyes' name now linked to the case, the police were about to make an arrest. But would the truth finally come to light? Or would Israel Keyes remain one step ahead? When Israel Keyes was arrested, he showed no emotion. His demeanor was calm, almost too calm. He seemed unbothered, even nonchalant, as though he had been expecting this day to come. But what happened next would chill everyone involved. Keyes began to confess. And when he didn't just confess to Samantha Koenig's murder. He confessed to multiple others. His chilling, matter-of-fact tone made every word even more disturbing. Keyes' demeanor during his confession was one of cold detachment. He spoke as though recounting a casual event in his life, without the usual signs of remorse or regret. This created an eerie, almost surreal feeling during the interrogation. The confessions came in pieces. He didn't give it all at once. Instead, he dropped bits of information as though savoring the control it gave him. He talked about his victims, his plans, his meticulous way of carrying out each murder. For him, it was a calculated process, something to be done with precision, like a job. He spoke of choosing his victims like a predator stalking prey. His first victim, whom Keyes described in chilling detail, had been a completely random target. His approach was simple but methodical: take them, kill them, leave no trace behind. The more he spoke, the clearer it became. He had carefully honed his craft, practicing for years to evade detection. Israel Keyes described the thrill he felt as he took his first victim. He didn't even know the person, but that didn't matter to him. He was only interested in the act, taking a life, controlling someone, and then disposing of them like trash. He didn't feel the weight of their lives, just the rush of the kill. To him, each murder was another notch in his belt. Keyes explained how he traveled the country, choosing places where he wouldn't be noticed. He didn't use the same methods for each crime, constantly changing tactics to avoid detection. He had a murder kit, a carefully packed bag of tools ready for his next victim. Think about that for a moment. He had an actual murder kit. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment decision for him. It was a planned, organized act that he could repeat whenever he felt the need. What does that tell us about his psychology? Keyes went on to explain the planning involved in each crime. He would pick his victims randomly, sometimes while traveling, sometimes while just living his life. He didn't limit himself to one area. His movements were erratic, unpredictable. It was this randomness that made him so dangerous and so difficult to catch. He also talked about his confidence. He felt invincible. He had never been caught, and he didn't expect to be. In fact, he had thought he would never be caught until the investigation into Samantha Koenig's case began to unravel the details of his actions. When he revealed the location of Samantha's body, it wasn't just the body they found. It was the discovery of how methodical Keyes had been in keeping the body hidden for weeks. But the true scope of his crimes wasn't fully understood until the FBI uncovered his personal journals. The entries were disturbing, accounts of a man obsessed with death and destruction, each entry a reminder of the lives he had taken and the lives he still intended to claim. The trial of Israel Keyes was a media frenzy. The details of his crimes were so gruesome, so calculated, that they left the public in shock. Samantha Koenig's family attended every day, hoping for justice, But what they didn't expect was the sheer coldness of Keyes during the proceedings. He showed no remorse, nothing that resembled an apology. He was just as detached in court as he had been during his confession. The courtroom dynamics were intense. The families of the victims, especially Samantha's, sat in the front row, waiting for closure. But with each word Keyes spoke, it became clear that this was not just a trial for one victim. It was a trial for a man who had taken multiple lives, leaving devastation in his wake. The defense's argument centered around Keyes' mental state. They argued that he was mentally unstable, driven by impulses beyond his control. But the prosecution pushed back, pointing out the fact that Keyes had meticulously planned every one of his murders, showing a clear lack of mental instability. He knew what he was doing, and he enjoyed it. Testimonies from family members were emotionally charged. They spoke about the lives lost, the pain they had suffered, and the absence of the victims they loved so much. Their words were raw and painful, painting a vivid picture of the life that was stolen from them. Samantha's father took the stand, his voice shaking as he spoke. "I never thought it would happen to my daughter," he said, his eyes filled with tears. He talked about the moment he realized his daughter wasn't coming home, the days he spent trying to hold on to the hope that she would walk through the door. The pain in his voice was undeniable. Every word was a reminder of the anguish he had suffered, and the courtroom fell silent as he spoke. Keyes' lack of emotion during the trial made everything more unsettling. He sat there, almost detached from the pain around him. His expression remained neutral, giving no sign of regret or remorse. His calm demeanor in the face of the overwhelming evidence only made the case more chilling. The jury had to deliberate, but with the weight of the evidence against Keyes, it seemed like a foregone conclusion. Yet, in the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Would the jury believe the defense's argument? Or would the truth finally come crashing down on Israel Keyes? After weeks of testimony, Israel Keyes was found guilty of all charges. But just when it seemed like the story would end with his conviction, a twist came. On December 2, 2012, Israel Keyes was found dead in his prison cell. It was ruled a suicide, but many believe there's more to the story. Keyes had been a man who was so calculated in his every action that it's hard to believe he would simply take his own life without some form of manipulation. Keyes' death raised more questions than it answered. Was it a suicide or was it something darker? Many in law enforcement felt that Keyes had more secrets that he had never shared. Some believed he had been silenced, either by someone else or by his own hand to avoid further interrogation. The psychological toll of Keyes' crimes didn't just affect his victims' families. It affected the entire criminal justice system. This case highlighted just how difficult it is to catch a serial killer. It also made authorities realize how meticulous and organized a predator like Keyes could be. Keyes' legacy would remain a dark shadow over the families of his victims. For them, the loss was permanent, and no amount of justice could ever bring their loved ones back. Was Keyes' death truly a suicide? Or did someone want to make sure his secrets stayed hidden forever? We may never know the full extent of the man's dark mind. Israel Keyes' crimes sent shockwaves through the country, not just because of the brutality of his actions, but because of the chilling realization that someone like him could have lived among us, undetected, for so long. His meticulous planning, his utter lack of remorse, and his ability to manipulate the system made him one of the most terrifying serial killers in recent history. But in the end, while he may have evaded full justice, his legacy remains. Keyes' legacy. Even though Keyes died in prison, his actions left a profound impact on everyone who was involved in the case. His legacy isn't just one of death and destruction, but also of questions that remain unanswered. How did someone like him go unnoticed for so long? How many other victims did he have? What would have happened if he hadn't been caught? The answers are still lost in the shadows of his mind, and they may never be fully uncovered. The family's pain. For the families of the victims, there is no real closure. While justice was served in a legal sense, emotionally, they were left with scars that will never heal. The fact that Keyes never showed any remorse only deepened the wound for these families. They were forced to confront the brutality of his crimes while grappling with the reality that they would never get their loved ones back. Samantha Koenig's family, Samantha's father in particular, was vocal about the pain of losing his daughter. His life was forever changed, and while the conviction of Keyes may have brought him some peace, it was clear that no amount of justice could bring back his little girl. He often spoke about the bizarre nature of the case, how Samantha's hair was braided differently in the photo Keyes sent, a detail that stayed with him long after the investigation. The realization that his daughter had already been dead when that photo was taken was devastating. Samantha's father, in particular, often spoke to the media about the endless hope he held on to. He would talk about the photo, the way his heart sank when he noticed something was wrong, the hope that his daughter might still be alive, that she might come home. But then the crushing realization that she had been gone all along. It was something no parent should have to experience. The investigators, for the detectives involved, Keyes' case became a professional and personal journey. They'd dealt with murder cases before, but Keyes' calculated nature and ability to evade detection for so long made this one different. The case stretched their abilities, challenged their perceptions, and left them haunted by the crimes he committed. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Keyes was a master manipulator who used his calm demeanor to deceive everyone around him. He wasn't just a killer. He was a predator who knew how to stay in the shadows. We often think of serial killers as monstrous figures, hiding in dark corners. But what if they walked among us, blending in perfectly? How many times have we passed someone like Israel Keyes in the street without realizing the true horror they were capable of? Can we ever really know the people around us? To understand the full horror of Israel Keyes' crimes, we must explore the psychology behind his actions. What drove him to commit such gruesome acts? What made him different from other criminals? The answer lies in his ability to detach from his victims, to view them not as human beings, but as objects for his twisted satisfaction. Keyes' motivation. Unlike many serial killers driven by sexual desire or trauma from their past, Keyes' motivation was rooted in something deeper and more disturbing. He didn't have a singular trigger. He didn't have a type of victim. Instead, his desire to kill seemed more about control, power, and the thrill of evading capture. Keyes often talked about how he saw his killings as a game, a test of his abilities. His ability to travel across the country, choose random victims, and then execute his plan with such precision made him feel invincible. Keyes' manipulation. Keyes was a master manipulator. His ability to remain calm during interrogations, to manipulate the authorities and the media, showcased how deeply his understanding of human psychology went. He didn't show fear when confronted with evidence. Instead, he treated the entire ordeal like a game of cat and mouse, enjoying the attention and the confusion he caused. The absence of remorse. One of the most chilling aspects of his personality was his complete lack of remorse. He didn't feel sorry for his victims. He didn't even feel guilt. To him, his actions were a form of power, a way to demonstrate his superiority over the world. He had no interest in redemption or forgiveness. He was driven by a need to prove something to himself, to maintain his control, and to show that he could outsmart everyone around him. In many ways, Keyes' lack of remorse is what made him so dangerous. He was unafraid of being caught. He saw his crimes as art, an expression of control. His detachment from the pain he caused his victims' families was something that baffled investigators and left the public in shock. It wasn't about the victims for Keyes, it was about him, about how much power he could amass before his inevitable downfall. The thrill of killing. For Israel Keyes, the actual act of murder was an exciting challenge, not an emotional release. He didn't feel satisfaction after the killings like other serial killers might. Instead, it was the process, the planning, the execution, and the idea that he was operating beneath the radar, unseen by the world, that thrilled him. His lack of emotional attachment to his victims made him even more dangerous. They were simply pawns in his twisted game. Do you believe some people are born with the capacity for evil? Or is it something that is developed over time? What makes a man like Israel Keyes, who appeared so normal on the surface, capable of such monstrous acts? Israel Keyes was a man who operated in plain sight. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He wasn't a figure who screamed danger. To those around him, he was a normal, if somewhat reserved, person. But that's the terrifying part. He looked just like anyone else. And that's what allowed him to commit such horrors without suspicion. Keyes' facade. One of the most unsettling aspects of Israel Keyes was his ability to blend in. He didn't look like a serial killer. He wasn't a disheveled loner, nor was he someone who drew attention to himself. He was an ordinary man in an extraordinary situation. This allowed him to slip through the cracks of society's awareness. He had jobs, relationships, and a relatively unremarkable life on the surface. People who knew him wouldn't have suspected a thing. The public's blind spot. The fact that he was able to evade suspicion for so long speaks volumes about how unaware we can be of the people around us. We often assume that danger will announce itself in loud and obvious ways, but Keyes showed us that predators don't always look like what we expect. They can be your neighbor, your colleague, or the person sitting next to you in a cafe. The case of Israel Keyes is a sobering reminder that evil can hide in the most ordinary of places. How he exploited his normalcy. Keyes used his normal appearance to his advantage. He didn't act out of the ordinary. He didn't draw attention to himself. This allowed him to carry out his crimes in secret. For years, he operated under the radar, and it wasn't until his actions escalated that law enforcement began to take notice. Keyes' ability to appear normal allowed him to carry out his killings without anyone ever suspecting him. He knew how to manipulate his surroundings, how to look just like everyone else, and how to stay invisible. This is perhaps the most terrifying part of his story. He wasn't just a killer. He was a predator who knew how to avoid detection. His normalcy was his greatest weapon. The case of Israel Keyes is one that will forever haunt those who were involved in it. For the victims, for the investigators, for the families, it was a journey through darkness that left many questions unanswered. Keyes' life and death are a reminder of the deep, unseen dangers that can lurk just beneath the surface of everyday life. After everything we've learned, can we ever truly feel safe knowing that someone like Keyes could slip through the cracks? Or do we have to acknowledge that some dangers are always lurking, even in the most seemingly peaceful corners of the world?